I've discovered that most critics themselves are cinematically illiterate. They don't really know much about movies. They don't know the history. They don't know the technology. They don't know anything. So for them to try to analyze it, they're lost.
All right, let's begin with some fair warning. This is going to be a very political commentary because, as we're going to see, Attack of the Clones is very political. Even though Star Wars is, quote, about wars, there was very little about the mechanics of warfare. I mean, you actually go through the OT, the Empire just is very vague. Like, how does it work? How do they get taxes? How do they oppress people? How do they monitor people? But here, he's going to go really in depth because we're going to see the Empire rise from the ashes of the Republic and see the Republic decline. And I know a lot of people on that basis don't like the film. They rank it as the worst one because it is just too boring. They don't care about all these political intrigue scenes. But for him, it's very thematically and even aesthetically necessary to link this up to the original trilogy. And to do that, we're going to see a lot of rhyming structure with the scenes, but they don't work the same way. At the most obvious level, the Jedi are no longer our POV characters. We're not supposed to really identify totally with Anakin or with Obi or with Padme. We're supposed to see them as sort of like these dark anti-heroes, and that we're going to see that Palpatine and Dooku, when you look very closely, have a point. They have a point in that these separatists have a right to separate themselves. All they want is commerce and to be not molested by the Republic. So there's this kind of twist that he's trying to give to us that we're not necessarily supposed to be on the side of the so-called good guys, and the bad guys do have some good points. And so we're supposed to see how difficult and cloudy everything is, and that's even in the beginning shots where we just get a lot of fog. I mean, fog and clouds come up a lot in the film, and that's supposed to be a clue that, yeah, we're dealing with a very morally ambiguous place. With Phantom Menace, there were blues all over the place. I kept pointing to scenes where blue, 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 and there are still a lot of blues in Attack of the Clones, but it's declining. So when we see the Jedi outfits, even though they're not totally red, they're starting to go down that path. They're sort of maroon and brownish. So we're already seeing the descent of the Jedi into this much more corrupt order, but he wants to be careful not to be too visually obvious. So again, the obvious main problem here is that the plot is really at odds with the theme, because we kind of wonder, why didn't he just structure the assassination attempt as well as discovering the clone army differently? But again, it's part of the logic of the film that he has to separate Obi and Anakin. Obi and Anakin are going to take their respective journeys. Of course, we know with Anakin, he's going to give in to vengeance. His personal psychology is going to break down because the nightmares basically destroy him. He's overtaken by fear. But Obi's a little bit more interesting because with the various scenes, especially with the librarian, when he tries to investigate the assassination attempts, you know, her very manner and speaking clue you into something that's gone very wrong, because he asks, well, where's this planet? And she's like, well, if it's not here, we don't have the planet, because the official records are always correct, and there's no way the official records are incorrect, so you're wrong. The planet doesn't exist, and of course it does exist, and that's where the battle takes place. But it just shows the mindset of the Jedi, that they're just so close-minded. They just want to believe Palpatine. They want to believe the Republic is still functioning, not because they care about democracy, but because they care about themselves. They're like, we're not going to look into that. Our role is just that we do what we do, they do what they do, and that's it. And Lucas is showing that's completely ridiculous. You cannot magically separate yourself from the political context. As a citizen, you do have a responsibility to look at what your leaders are saying. If you don't, then don't be surprised when they use deception within a crisis to take away your rights and freedoms, or to take your, money and power and privileges. Obviously we were supposed to see Palpatine as the villain, but what is he really doing? He's just manipulating people's desires. The Trade Federation is easy, right? The banking clan, those people are easy. They just want more money. They want more power. But he's even offering the Jedi a lot more. He wants to say, don't worry, just rest safe and secure. We're going to get this clone army to you. You're going to take it over. But we're supposed to be very twisted about how this happens and why it happens and their reaction to it. When Obi-Wan sees the children being militarized in the Jedi Temple, he's very indifferent. He doesn't care. And Yoda's like, yeah, of course we're supposed to do this. Of course we're supposed to militarize the children. But he's even not shocked when he gets to the Camino complex. He sees it for himself. He sees these children, these clone, being turned into soldiers at a very young age. They're being brainwashed. And he's very much, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, how did this work? How did this happen? And they let him know about the Sifo Dyas plot line, which I agree is like a fatal problem because he never gets back to it. But we're supposed to see, he should be shocked. He should be outraged. He should be fighting them. And instead he's like, oh, that's interesting. Well, how did the clones work? How good of slaves are they? He's totally not concerned with them at all. That's when he has that eventual great fight with Jango. We're not supposed to be on Obi-Wan's side. He's attacking Jango. I mean, Django, of course, is a bounty hunter, right? He has no loyalty, but Django's trying to get away with his child, and Obi's attacking him. Now, this is a very Western morality where there is no, quote, good guy or bad guy. We're just in this very rugged terrain, and it's whoever has more power, right? I work for the Jedi, you work for your masters, but my masters tell me to get you, so you better come along. And Django's like, well, I'm not going to do that, and then the fight begins. And he's very brilliant in the way he steeps us. Now, as a viewer, when I saw this in 2002, I hated it because it's all murky and muddy and rainy, but that's the point. The whole film is submerged in this moral ambiguity of, well, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? I mean, and the obvious question is, well, if I can't identify a good guy or bad guy, then this is a bad film, right? Who do I have rooting interest for? And I think he does sort of answer the question, right? Because we do see early on the good parts of Anakin. Even though he's very reckless, we do see he wants to do good. But he just wants power. He wants the power to do good. And of course, it's a little too obvious, right? He can't save his mother. But it's this temptation that if I had the power, if I could have control over the media, if I could have control over politics, I would do the right thing. But he says very outright, yes, of course I would deceive people. I might even steal, cheat, lie, even kill people, right? He commits genocide. But he says it for himself. But I did it for the right reasons. I did it for the greater good. And that's, I think, where there is a definite kind of Noam Chomsky critique of 9/11 and the way deception is used by these politicians. But he's adding in his own, kind of flavor from a Lucas angle, saying, you might look at this as all silly action and all this ridiculous popcorn fun, but that's how you're tempted down to the dark side, right? Palpatine is offering them to be heroes. You're going to get the clone army, you're going to become generals, and you're going to stop this evil trade federation. You're going to, once again, save the galaxy. And it's that temptation of they think they're doing good, but really they know that they're doing evil, but they accept it as, well, it's a necessary evil, right? We have to say Padme, we have to say Obi-Wan. And then the question becomes, is that really true? Because Padme says very much outright in the Sith, the sequel later, that, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should have negotiated with Dooku. Maybe we shouldn't have automatically started to fight them. Even if he did try to assassinate me, turning to violence was not the right solution. That's how Palpatine was able to exploit everything. And Anakin just goes nuts. He can't believe what he's hearing. Like, they're terrorists. They're separatists. They're communists. They're the enemy. How could you And it's that mentality and how it starts to germinate very early on. That's what he's trying to show. But I think the problem was that he chose a really deliberately weird acting style to do it in. And so the depth or the moral ambiguity is sort of like lost. Either like we're thinking like, either I understand what Anakin's thinking or I don't. Either he's doing good acting or he's not. But he's doing a very particular kind of acting style, as well as juxtaposing it with the other images in the original trilogy. And I think that's what set people off, because at least with the Empire Strikes Back, as well as Return of the Jedi, they're the small group. We are automatically on their side. There's no side we necessarily are with in this entry. It seems like all sides have blame and guilt, and so it sort of just disturbs us because we want to identify easily with an antagonist and protagonist, and Lucas is just not giving us that. So I think that's the problem. It's a failure from a genre perspective, but he intended to do that. He didn't want to make a genre film. He wanted to make a much more deeper art film, but just use the genre stuff basically to trick people to buy the tickets. And I think on that level, it's always a twisted thing whether a director should deceive the audience, even if the quote, motivation is good. Obviously, it's a good thing that he's trying to alert us, especially after 9/11, that you may be being lied to. There's a lot of deception going on here. Don't necessarily believe everything the government is telling you. That's a good message, but the theme and the plot are not resonating it because it needs to be very subtle. So I think obviously people just missed the subtlety and just assumed, well, you have some good action scenes and a couple of good dialogue scenes, but everything else is just murky. It's plotting. It's not going anywhere. You need to really tell, Hayden to act better, tell Natalie to stop being so, annoying on camera. And I think they just missed the point, which is that's the real issue. It's the vagueness of the Empire and how it's being born. And he can't tell us right away because that's what the Sith sequel is going to do. But I think when we take it in totality, there's a lot of interesting visual, metaphorical things going on with the illusions. Perhaps not as brilliant as Phantom Menace or even the original trilogy, but definitely a very powerful entry and a very solid piece by Lucas and his very strongly anti-war themes. Again, I understand if you're more on the right-wing side, conservative side, you're not going to like this interpretation, but I think if you look patiently at the way the colors are used, the blues, the reds, and everything else, and the way the themes sort of duplicate with the original trilogy, I think you will see that there's a very clear anti-war message beneath it all, but you have to be patient in how he's communicating it to a mass audience. All right, this has been Star Wars Analyzed on a revisionist case for Episode 2 as a very great film, not top 20. more top 30, but still a very powerful, solid entry in the Star Wars saga. Star Wars Analyzed on episode 2. If you like the content, please hit the like button below. Please like and or subscribe. Thank you for listening.